Welcome to Subconscious Conversations, where we take a look into the intricate world of the subconscious mind and how to heal the body, mind, heart, and spirit through its wisdom and guidance. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining me today. I'm Brielle, and I'm the soul practitioner at Springseed Wellness, where I practice the energy medicine techniques of emotion code, body code, and belief code, which were created by the wonderful Dr. Bradley Nelson. As promised in episode 2, I'm going to talk about consent and privacy in today's episode. These are both incredibly important to me, and I assume that they are incredibly important to you as well. So we'll get right into it. Let's start with consent. I absolutely must have a person's explicit, conscious consent in order for me to work on them. First and foremost, this is my personal ethical standard. Secondly, it's the ethical standard of Discover Healing, who I'm certified through. Thirdly, I think it's a little unsafe to work on people without their consent. And lastly, it's my personal ethical standard. In fact, I actually require conscious consent and subconscious consent. Although it's not always as cut and dry as all that, and that's the reason for today's episode, so I can explain the rare occasions that there might be gray areas. First, I want to discuss a popular theory out there about so-called higher self consent. Some people believe that if the subconscious mind or the higher self gives consent for an energetic connection, that it's okay to do so without having the person's conscious approval. Not judging anyone else for their particular beliefs, but to me, this is like sneaking into someone's back door while they're sleeping. I personally feel like I have absolutely no business interfering with someone's energy without their conscious consent, no matter how much I may want to help them. And believe me, sometimes the desire to help someone is so strong that it's tempting to consider. But I feel like I absolutely must honor each and every individual's free will. And if I'm doing energy work on them without it being their conscious choice, I feel like I'm circumventing their free will, and that goes against my morals. Not only that, but there is a safety issue at hand, in my opinion, as well. As I mentioned in episode 3, this work can sometimes produce processing symptoms, which can get pretty uncomfortable at times. And if someone has significant energy shifts going on inside them and they're experiencing processing symptoms and don't understand where it's coming from, it can make things a lot harder for that person. I've seen this firsthand with one of my family members who asked me to work on them without their knowledge. They gave me consent to work on them, but they didn't want to know when I was doing it or what the results were. They wanted it done in secret, basically. And this was a great learning experience for me, and I'm eternally grateful for it, because being able to conduct blind studies with this work really helped me fully believe in its validity, because I saw firsthand the changes happening with this family member, even though they didn't even know I was working on them. For instance, if I had done emotion code, they would start expressing strange feelings of all the emotions that I had released. If I had done body code, they would start talking about all the different things that had come up during the session. And it was so fascinating and so validating to witness the process going on. But it got to a point where more difficult things were coming up, and I could tell there was a great deal of added distress in connection to the processing symptoms, because they didn't understand why they were feeling the way they were feeling mentally, emotionally, and physically. So we made a new arrangement where I work on them whenever it's convenient, but I tell them that same day and I email a report to them to view whenever they want. And I'm very grateful that we had this new arrangement once I got into belief code, because that can have some harder processing symptoms on occasion. And in fact, there have been 2 times for myself with the belief code that the belief system and all the associations are removed, but then during the processing, somehow some other similar trauma gets all of a sudden triggered, and or maybe it was just a larger dose of energy shift at that moment. But in any case, it became very emotionally distressing. And both times, a quick round of energy balancing resets were done, and I was good to go. But had I not realized what was going on, I fear what would have happened, because I would have ended up staying in that panicked emotional state and I wouldn't have been able to resolve it in a brief 5 minutes. But since I knew what the problem was, it was resolved in very little time. The bottom line is, when you know why you're on the roller coaster, it's a lot more enjoyable than if you simply find yourself on the roller coaster. Okay, so I think I made it clear how serious I am about consent. So now I'll get to those very rare instances where there might be some exceptions. One exception is if a client has anything that hinders them from making their own decisions. I would need the consent from their next of kin or whoever makes their medical decisions. But that only takes care of the conscious consent piece, or in this case, the conscious consent of the legal representative of the client. But I still need the subconscious consent from the client themselves, since they didn't directly give me the conscious consent. For example, if someone is in a coma and their next of kin or person who makes their medical decisions for them asks me to work on this person, I would then ask permission from that person's subconscious mind. If their subconscious is agreeable, I will work on them. If it's not, I will not. The subconscious always has final say, in my opinion. Same thing goes for if someone doesn't speak the same language as me and the person who helps them with their medical decisions and or translating asks me to work on them. I will ask their subconscious for permission and follow what it says. Children are another exception, although this one comes with a greater gray area for me personally. With children, the same thing goes with as the previous example. I would need the conscious or legal consent from whoever makes medical decisions for the child, but I would also need the subconscious consent from the child themselves. I do not care how badly you want me to work on your child. If their subconscious mind indicates that they aren't ready for it, I will not do it. But there is also gray areas here depending on age, in my opinion. It's hard with children because I get in a spot in my own mind where I'm a little uncertain at what point is this child in control of their own free will, and at what point should this child be allowed to have a say in their own care. Not having children myself, but remembering being a child and having that desire to be a part in my own care, that's where I can get a little iffy on those boundaries. So I feel like the more aware and involved the child is with the healing process, the better it will go, especially when it comes to teenagers. I remember how hard it was for me as a teenager, and I know how much this work would have really eased that angst had I known about it back then. But at the same time, I don't want to be adding processing symptoms to an already stressed teenager without them being fully aware of what's going on. Younger children seem to have a much easier time with the energy shifts and the processing symptoms. But when you reach teen years, when your body is already going through so many mental, emotional, and physical changes, it could make things a lot harder if they're not aware of it. But I'm also very confident with good communication and a gentle approach, it would go really well. But I think it would go best if the teen is directly involved. I love working with kids because I feel like the sooner one can start resolving issues, the more well adjusted a person will be as they get older and as life gets harder. They will be able to handle what life throws at them a lot better than those of us who have had a whole life's worth of emotional baggage weighing us down. Not to mention ancestral trauma, but that's a topic for another episode. Now, animals are another exception. With wild animals or stray animals, I only need their subconscious consent. That's simple. With pets, I need the owner's permission plus the animal's subconscious consent. Where the gray area comes in for me in this regard is when an animal needs help, but say they're in a shelter. Technically, I should ask permission from the shelter owner since they are in possession of the animal, but at the same time, that animal is fully capable of deciding for itself whether or not it wants help with its own issues. And what if a pet was in an abusive or neglective household? Would I really feel like I need consent from the abusers in order to help the victim? I'm not sure I would. I'm realizing I had a little bit more to say about that than I thought. So I guess it's time to get into the privacy segment before I lose everyone's interest. Even though I'm not legally bound to HIPAA privacy laws, I choose to be because I feel like it's the only ethical thing to do. I will never share your information or talk about your problems with anyone else unless you're totally okay with that. I very purposely ask for as little information as possible from my clients in an effort to foster an environment where someone can still feel as private as they need to be while still inching forward into healing themselves. I'll get more detailed on the reasoning behind that in a future episode, but I know firsthand how hard it can be to start opening up to the healing process and how vulnerable one can feel. So I want people to know that they only have to share as much as they want to share and that it will remain private. In fact, one of the things I love about this work is that you don't even have to leave the house or speak to anyone. It can be done 100% remotely and significantly anonymously. Now, that being said, I want to clarify something here. As I said in episode 2, I will not know all the details of your life, nor do I desire to. You are free to share as much as or as little as you choose. However, there is a flip side to that coin. Details do come out, and sometimes they are deeply personal and traumatic, but it's also a little vague most of the time. It's kind of like a jigsaw puzzle where the information I'm pulling up is one piece of the puzzle, and by itself, it doesn't really give much detail. But sometimes when there are enough pieces of the puzzle coming out at once, you can start to see a clearer picture of the story. And that's okay. I will not judge you for anything that comes up in a session. Whatever comes out, however it happens, trust that your subconscious is guiding the process in the way that best suits your needs. Now, as with the consent part, there are a few gray areas here as well. For instance, I may discuss anecdotal scenarios with fellow energy workers if I see a trend to a common issue coming up that I want some extra insight on. But I would never share particular information about a particular client. This would only be if multiple clients were all presenting with similar issues and I felt like I needed some additional insight about the broader subject. Another gray area is, as much as I will not judge you for what might come out during a session, if it is clear that you are perpetrating a crime that would or is harming someone, I will report it. Likewise, if I feel like a client is in imminent danger of being hurt by someone else, or if I feel like a client is in imminent danger of hurting themselves or others, I will report it to the appropriate officials for the protection of everyone involved. Now, I know that was a lot, but thank you so much for joining me today. And please join me for next episode where I will be talking about muscle testing and the subconscious mind. See you then. If you would like to set up a session with me to experience this work for yourself, please go to springseedwellness.com. If you would like to find a practitioner in your local area, please go to discoverhealing.com. And please always feel free to reach out with any questions or specific topics you would like me to address. See you next episode.